Okay, let's get started. So we're up to the subject about misappropriating tzedakah. So let's see what the Gemara says. Moiser shvuyim l'shvuyim. If there's extra funds from funds that were created for captives, so there was a fund to help captives, and they had extra money, l'shvuyim, you could just apply it. You don't dissolve the fund. You apply it to other shvuyim. Moisher shavui, loiser shavui. But what if they raised money for a specific person? That cannot be diverted. That has to go only to the benefit of that specific captive. Moisher aniyim la'aniyim. Again, a fund that's for aniyim. If there's extra, they just keep it in the fund for the next ani. But moisher ani lois ani. But if money was raised for a specific person, it's earmarked, then it could not be given elsewhere. Moiser amesim l'mesim. Again, if there's a fund to bury mesim who don't have money, it just stays in the fund for the next person. Moiser ames l'yorshav. But if money was raised for a specific mace, it's understood that the people who gave the money assume that the yorshim have no money either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to raise money for the mace in the first place, and therefore the extra money can go to the yorshim. The people who gave money for a mace wanted it only to be for the mace. And therefore, if there's extra funds, it stays till Elio comes, which I assume means until Tchias HaMesim, so that it can go back to the mace. There's a famous story with someone who passed away and left over billions of dollars. And his son yarshened the money. And of course, all of the moistus came pouncing on him for donations. He just became very wealthy. And he says, I can't give you any money. I'm a maimon. So they told him, what does Amunah have anything to do with you not giving us money? He says, well, I believe Mashiach is going to come very soon, and there'll be Tchias HaMesim, and my father's going to want his money back. And if I gave it all away, I'm in big trouble. Rab Nosson says,
1 minute. 1 minute. So what do you mean Tchias HaMesim? He's not going to be a shvui. He's not going to be captured after Tchias HaMesim.
Well, no, this was a mace.
Yeah. So you just said that you have to wait till Tchias HaMesim and then give him the money.
That's right.
Why would he
because
deserve
it's raised for a specific person?
Right, but it was only raised to release him from captivity.
No, it was raised to bury him.
It was raised to bury him.
Right.
There's two different cases in Mishnah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but even so, he doesn't need to be buried either. Akiva, I hope you have your refunds ready.
Yeah.
Well, I just was going to ask you that question. Why is it that even if somebody comes back to Tchias HaMesim, it's not his money anymore? The son was koined b'Yerusha.
You're going to give him a heart attack again. What are you doing?
No, he thinks it's not his anymore.
I'm not sure how it works. I don't know. We should have that problem, the car of Mamish.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we're going to have that problem.
Even if it was, the son usually spends time getting rid of it.
There's a famous story in the times, I believe, of the Chavetz Chaim, where there was a very big miser, and they couldn't get him to contribute anywhere. And the Chevra Kadisha told him and told the family that unless there's a contribution made, we will not bury him. And he died. And the Chevra Kadisha, let's say if a normal plot was $3,000, they were asking for $20,000 for the plot. And the family actually took the Chevra Kadisha to secular court over extortion. And the Chavetz Chaim went to represent the Chevra Kadisha. The Chavetz Chaim said that Klal Yisrael, we believe that someone who doesn't give any tzedakah is not going to stand up for Tchias HaMesim. So when we sell a plot to a nifter, it's really only a long-term lease, but eventually it's going to be returned. But since this person never gave tzedakah, he's not going to stand up at Tchias HaMesim, it's a purchase. Of course, a purchase is a lot more money than a long-term lease. So Zok the Gemara weiter. If you have extra money for a mace, you go to Akiva and you build a more elaborate matzeva. Akiva, now we're talking. So anytime there's extra money for a mess, go straight to Akiva, and he could, if you have more chickens, add noch skillas. He will make you anything you need.
By the time the Chevra Kadisha got done with him in the funeral home, there's very little left for the matzeva. Let me tell you.
Is there a mission that discusses charity campaigns where they collect and then any excess funds becomes we're going to collect another $50,000.
We're going to discuss that shortly. But Akiva, I told you the story about the stone, about this lady who never really had the greatest life with her husband. I told you that story. Okay, we'll save it for later. Should we with it tonight, or should we go?
Yeah.
There's this lady.
Keep going. Cover some more ground first. No pun intended.
What happened? Okay, David Dayan, this explains, this touches about what you said. They raised money for somebody because they assumed he had no money. And then he got discovered. Then they saw him after he was schnutting in the shul. They saw him pull off in his Ferrari. So what do you do with the money? Rabbi Yirmiyah Sovar, Meimar, let's say that Moisra and Meishli Yarshim. The extra money goes to the Yarshim. So they raised money for someone who was poor. They thought he was poor. He was a mace. In other words, they were trying to raise money to bury him. And after they finished raising the money, they realized he doesn't need the money. So they give it to the Yarshim, which means, once again, that the family would be happy with that. Amalei Rabbi Yechutra says, how could you say that? The people who contributed weren't looking to enrich the Yarshim. They were looking to help bury a Nebuch, a Nifri that didn't have any money to provide for his burial. Amr Lay, so what happens if Edi attacked Rabbi Yirmiyah? Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Meimer, let's suggest Moshe Meshli Yarshim. He didn't say it unequivocally. He was sort of probing, is this what you should do? And Rabbi Edi attacked him and says, are you crazy? How could you say that? Like Ibnullah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah responded, Analoi Amris, I didn't say as a psak, I was just probing what the loch is. But you're saying it with such certainty that you cannot give it to the Yarshim? Minon loch. Where did you get that from? Tani b'shem Reb Nosson. Tani b'shem Reb Nosson. We learned the name of Reb Nosson. Moshe Mace, if there's extra money for a mace, Yibna loy nefesh al kivroi, build for him an elaborate matzeva, and if you have extra money, the yasaloi ziluf al gaba mitosing. In those days, they didn't have refrigeration, so by Levias, the mess would never smell. So they would spray scented liquids to freshen the air up, so it shouldn't smell so bad. It makes things smell. That's also covered in mess. So do other elaborate expenditures with the money that are covered in mess. Tony, we learned. You're not allowed to be paid to one captive with money that was actually raised and earmarked for a different captive. Then goivin talis batalis. If you raise money for one beged, you're not allowed to buy a different type of beged. However, the Gaboye Tzedakah, who raised money, and they do divert funds to other areas, you don't protest against them. Rather, we trust them, and we assume that when people give tzedakah, they trust that if the Gaboye Tzedakah has to divert funds, they're doing it for the right reasons, and it would be allowed. You never make a matzeva for tzaddikim at all. A tzaddik requires no memorial whatsoever. Why is that? Because divreim hein zechronim. Their Torah that's said over in their name, that their Torah is what they're remembered for. So they don't need, if someone's not a tzaddik and doesn't have any Torah, so then he needs to have his guard, he needs to have a matzeva. However, if someone has Torah, that's good enough. Now, I believe we also make a matzeva to stop someone from becoming tamei, but I guess you keep it to a minimum because their main zikaron isn't from what Akiva composed to write on their stone. His main zikaron is the Torah that we say over in his name. Rabbi Yochanan have a masmich la'azon. Rabbi Yochanan, Rashi, the Taklim brings down that he was either very heavy or he wasn't well, so he needed someone to lean on. He needed someone to support him when he walked. Masmich also. Al Rab Chia bar Abba. He leaned on Rab Chia bar Abba, so Rab Chia bar Abba sort of was his attendant and helped him. But Rabbi Eliezer came up upon them and saw them, and right away, he avoided Rabbi Yochanan, and he hid from him. And Rabbi Yochanan was offended why Rabbi Eliezer would hide away. It's like the famous story in the Mir where a bocher who just came to the mir heard that Rabbeinu Shnetzal was giving shir, so everyone dashed out of the Bismillah to escape the shir, and this new bocher didn't even know who Rabbeinu was, so he actually bumped right into Rabbeinu. So Rabbeinu asked him, "Where are you running to?" So he says, "You don't know? Rabbeinu is saying a shir now, so I got to get out of here." That's the famous story they show with Rabbeinu. So V'amar Halan Tarti Milayu Hadain Bavlo Ovidbei. I'm upset at this Bavli, Rabbi Eliezer, the unmannered Bavli. I'm upset about the following two things that he did. First of all, he comes upon me, he doesn't greet me, he doesn't say hello. V'chada mitmar. Now, this doesn't really mean the second thing. These two things we're soon to see was all one thing, because Rabbi Yochanan is going to bring up another complaint shortly. So you avoid me, you don't say shalom, and you hide. Why would you do that? So Rabbi Yochanan was upset with Rabbi Eliezer. Amalei Rabbi Yaakov Eidi wanted to calm Rabbi Yochanan down. They shouldn't be upset. And he said, Kach nehigun gavhoin. This is how we fear zich. There's an era, a small person, loy shol b'shleim the rabbi, doesn't just come right up to a great person and say shalom aleichem like we're buddies. Verkehrt, because they respect them, they revere them. The inun nahagun umakaimen, they fear zich, and they are fulfilling the pasuk that says, the young children saw me and hid away out of fear, out of respect. But the yeshishim, but the elderly, more respectable people, they came and stood before me to greet me. So maybe don't be upset, but be offended by what Rabbi Eliezer did. He was doing it out of respect for you. So Omer Lahu, now he saw, when Rabbi Yaakov Eidi spoke to Rabbi Yochanan, he saw that he wasn't quite calmed down by what he said. So he tried to bring it out in a different way to calm Rabbi Yochanan down. So he told him, Lemevar Kamida Adura, tell me, are you allowed to walk up and greet the Getchke, the Avodah Zarah called Adura? Amalei. So Rabbi Yochanan said, what type of question is that? Ma'at Polaglei Yikar? But you want to show him respect by not confronting him? Avur Kamoi, walk right up to him. In other words, show a lack of respect by walking right up to the Avodah Zarah, v'sameino, and blind his eye, meaning make fun of him, to have no respect for him. So Rabbi Yochanan inadvertently just paskined that it's respectful to avoid something. So Rabbi Yaakov Eidi says, if that's the case, then Yosy Rabbi Eliezer of it. So then why would you be upset with Rabbi Eliezer by your own psak, which states that it's respectful to hide and it's disrespectful for a young person to just confront a gadol? So it's perfect. Yosy Rabbi Eliezer of it, the overcomer. So with that point, the way Rabbi Yaakov Eidi brought it out, it calmed Rabbi Yochanan down, because in fact, by his own admission, he realized that what Rabbi Eliezer did was actually respectful. Another problem Rabbi Yochanan said that I have with Rabbi Eliezer is he says over a Torah, and he says over my Torah, and he doesn't quote my name. I know Rav Yishvei once told me, Yosef Zalman, I don't mind if you say over all of my Torah in your name, but I beg you never say over your Torah in my name. But Rabbi Yochanan had a taina that Rabbi Eliezer said over his Torah, and Rabbi Eliezer didn't identify that the Torah came from Rabbi Yochanan. So now they had another problem that they had to calm Rabbi Yochanan down about. So Nichnas Lufan of Rabami Rabasi, they told him, please don't get too upset, because when you get upset, it only leads to problems. The Bismedish of the coppersmiths, there was a machlokes, and the shaila was there was a peg that had a ball at the end of it, an orb at the end of it, and there was a question if it's a muksa. Shenechlaku, there was a machlokes as to whether or not this was muksa. Shenechlaku, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yosy, ad shekoru sefer Torah b'chabotzon. In the anger, they tore a sefer Torah. Frankly, more koru sefer Torah, they didn't really tear a sefer Torah. El shenikra sefer Torah. In the ensuing argument, a sefer Torah got torn. There was a zokin there whose name was Rabbi Yochanan Bekisma. Omar, he said, if this Beis Knesset doesn't end up a Beis Avodah Zarah, because of this machlokes that occurred. So therefore, Therefore, he told Rabbi Yochanan, please calm down because you see terrible things happen when there are hakpadas. That's where two chaverim are arguing. Yes, they shouldn't have hakpadas on one another, but I'm much greater than Rabbi Eliezer. And in fact, he was disrespectful. He didn't say something over my name, and there's nothing wrong if I have hakpad on him. So we needed to find some way to calm Rabbi Yochanan down. So once again, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi came to the rescue. He always was able to find some way to show Rabbi Yochanan not to be offended. Nichlas lefanav Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi. Amalei, it says in the pasuk, Ksiv, Kasher Tziva Hashem es Moshe Avdoi, Kain Tziva Moshe es Yeshua. And Yeshua gave it over to Klal Yisrael. Fragt Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi to Rabbi Yochanan. You think every single time Yeshua said anything to Klal Yisrael, this is what Moshe said, this is what Moshe said? No, he didn't repeat everything over and say, this is what Moshe said. Rather, Yeshua Yosy v'Darish, Yeshua darshan, but v'yoy did not coil, Shatar Shal Moshe. Everyone understood that everything that Yeshua had came from Moshe. Shal Moshe. Af ata, so you, Rabbi Yochanan, and your Talmud of Eliezer Yosy v'Darish, he darshans, but v'akal yoydin Shatar Shal Chai. Everybody knows that it's your Torah, so don't be offended, Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Eliezer is not saying over that the Torah is yours. By default, everybody knows that the Torah is yours, and therefore you have no need to be concerned. Amr Lehen, so he told the rest of the people around, why couldn't you calm me down? I see Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi is very good. He always finds the right words to say to calm me down. You should learn from him to learn how to calm me down. Why was he making such a big deal that they have to say everything over in his name? Even David HaMelech wanted things to be said over in his name. I will live in your tent forever. I will shield myself in the cloak of your wings forever. Did David really think he was going to live forever? Of course not. I should merit my word should be said over in the Batech Nesios and in the Batech Midrashos. And the Tachlim brings down Batech Nesios refers to the tefillas, all of the beautiful tefillas that I composed, my Tehillim, and all of the Torah and the Lamdas and the Piskei Halacha that I taught in the Bismedrash, those should all be said over in my name. So at the end of the day, you see David was makbid on it. So Rabbi Yochanan said, if David was makbid on it, I guess I should be makbid as well. Shimon ben Nezira b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak Omar, kol Talmid Chacham she'oimrim dvar halacha mipiv v'olam hazeh. Any Talmid Chacham who's no longer alive, and people say over something in his name in this world, svazov roichashois imay bekever. His lips move in the kever. What does it mean his lips move? They don't really move. He's a dead body. What's the significance of it? I'm going to read the words of the Taklin, and together we'll try to figure out what this means. So the Taklin says, by Svasav Roichashois, he says, Roichashois is Sha'or HaTorah Hayoytze Mipia Aimer, the light of the Torah that leaves the mouth of the person who's saying over the Torah, Mishkasher B'Hashoras Nafshoi, connects to the remaining nefesh. And now we know that in nefesh, there's a nefesh, ruach, and neshama in each person. The nefesh remains by the grave. So the Torah that comes out of the person who's speaking the Torah words connects to the remaining nefesh that's by a kaver. And that's why it uses the word roichashois. His lips are moving because it's connected to the nefesh, which remains by the kaver. It touches the source of these divrei Torah, sheshana mimenu, from where the Torah was learned from, like a mash of grapes that are fermenting. So somehow it impacts the neshama. It goes and nourishes the neshama in some way. And we learn, it says in the pasuk, your throat will be like nice wine. Doivev sifsa yeshenim, will be speaking the lips of those who are sleeping. Just like a mash of grapes. If you push your finger on it, any air bubbles in it right away rise to the top and escape. Afsif sesem shal tzadikim kivin sho'imim dvar halacha mipiem shal tzadikim. When you say a dvar halacha in the name of the tzadikim, which is like touching their lips, sif sesem merachesh shoysi imoin bekever. Their lips move along with them in the kever. Frek Gemara, ma hana loy. What hana does this person in the kever have from it? By Nazira Amar, kadein deshase konditon. If you drink konditon, we learned konditon is a wine that has honey and spices in it. So the leftover, after you swallow it, there's still like a leftover residual taste. That's the taste that's remaining by the neshama. It's like someone who drinks old, matured wine. Even though you've drunk it already, time of Bepuma, there's still a residual taste. And the Archbishop brings down, konditon is wine with honey as well as spices. So he learns that the spices is the shakla v'taya, the lomdas of the Gemara, which is geschmack. The wine is the actual Torah, the halacha. The konditon is the spice which gives it the geschmack, and the honey is the divrei agoda. All of those things, all of the chadushim are all that taste. While Rabbi Yitzchak says the main good taste is the taste from the dvar halacha, which is the wine portion. If one says over a halacha in the name of its originator, when he's saying it, he should visualize as if the person who was mechadish this is standing in front of him. Visualize this person's face, and as he's talking to him, you should walk with that tselem. And there's different pshatim why. There are some pshatim that say because you also need to transmit and communicate the expression on the face of the person who's giving you the Torah, because the expression makes a big difference. And it's a known thing that Chaim Shmulevitz would rehearse saying his shir in the mirror. When he practiced the shir, he actually said it over in the mirror so that he can rehearse not only the words that he was going to say, but the actual facial expressions that he was going to have during his shiurim. So that's one shot, that you get much greater clarity if you see the person's face and his expressions. And the other shot is you have to have tremendous respect for the person whose Torah you're saying over, so it should be as if he's standing in front of you, and you fear him and respect him as if he's standing in front of you. Because if it says in the pasuk, Rav Adam Yikra Ish Chasloi. Any person will say over from a person who has chadushim. Zeh shar kol adam. That refers to everybody else. But the ish emunah miyimtza, someone who's precise and reliable, that's hard to find. Zeh Rab Zehira. That's referring to Rab Zehira. Rab Zehira was someone who was a very precise and accurate person, and when he said things over, they had to be 100% accurate in every which way. Where do you see how Rab Zehira was makbid on accuracy? From a couple of different vignettes. Nobody should even listen and be concerned with the Torah that Reb Sheshes said over. How you talking? Because Reb Sheshes was blind, and since Reb Sheshes was blind, whenever he heard over a Torah from somebody, he was never able to see the person speaking. And since he couldn't see the person speaking, he lacked the true, deep understanding of things, and therefore we shouldn't even accept Torah from Reb Sheshes. That was the high level of discrimination that Reb Zera had for information for Torah and how makbid he was on its accuracy. Amalei Reb Zera L'Rabasi, Chakim Rebbe L'Bar Pasya. He asked Rabasi, "Do you know Bar Pasya's Torah? Could you tell me over? Do you have a clarity in Bar Pasya's Torah?" That Amar Shmaitza Mishmei. You say things over from him, so I assume you have great clarity in what he said, and I assume you know him well. Amar Lei. So Rabasi said, No, I didn't hear it directly from Bar Pasya. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishmei. Rabbi Yochanan would tell it over to me in the name of Bar Pasya. So you see, Rabbi Zera wasn't happy with that because he sort of called him on it. If you didn't hear it directly from the Bala Memra, you're lacking in clarity. And again, another story. Amar Zera L'Rabasi. Chachim Rebbe L'Rav. Are you a maven in Rav? That Amar Shemaitz and Mishmei, you say things over in his name. Amar Rabbi Barava. Amar Mishmei. No, I didn't hear it directly from him. Rabbi Ada Barava said it over in his name. Ein dar she'ein boy letzon. Period. Dr. Gemara knew Allah. Ein dar she'ein boy letzon. There's no generation that doesn't have in it Latzonim. I always tell you, it says, if a person wants to be a Letz, the Rebbeinu Shloim Letz. B'dorei shel David, they changed this chaf to a beis. B'dorei shel David, if the music in the background is disruptive, please let me know and I'll have them quiet it down. B'dorei shel David, in the generation of David, ma hoyu perutei adar oisim. What did the perutei adar do? They would shepherd David. We know that they shepherd David his whole life. His whole life. They would go to his windows. And you know why they would shepherd him from his windows? Because they wanted to remind him about the Maisa Basheva, which only came from the fact that he saw her through the window. So they were looking for ways to get him. I remember they would tell him, David, we can't wait till they build the Beis Hamikdash. They knew that the Beis Hamikdash would not be built in David's days. So they were basically saying, David, when are you going to drop dead already? So that should be highly offensive to David, because basically they're saying they can't wait till David passes away. But that's not how David reacted. Even though they're just saying it to make me upset, Halavai, I'm happy to die. I also want the Beis Hamikdash so badly, and I can't wait to die so that it would clear the way for the Beis Hamikdash. A klala should come upon me. In other words, I promise that I'm truly, truly happy with their yearning, because I'm yearning as well. I get excited. I get excited. So what did Hashem answer him? When your days are full, only then will you lie with your fathers. I am not going to decrease your life, even though you'd be happy to give up your life to hasten the building of the Beis Hamikdash. I'm not going to take away from your life. I'm going to give you maximum days. What's the whole purpose of Shlomo HaMelech building the Beis Hamikdash? To be Makav Karbanis Tzibur. Well, guess what, David? It's dear to me. The tzedakah and mishpat that you do, Yosy in a carbon, even greater than the carbonis that are going to be brought on the Mizbeach. Shenemar say tzedakah mishpat nifchar l'Hashem Mizbeach is more exciting to the Rebbeinu Shalom than the Mizbeach. So even though David was happy to give up his life to bring to the Beis Hamikdash, to hasten the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem said, no, your life is a Beis Hamikdash as well, and I don't need anything else. It's interesting because we learned in the Gemara Shabbos that when David HaMelech found out that he was going to die on Shabbos, he did everything he could do to avoid dying, because he learned the whole Shabbos because he didn't want to die. So how do you make these two things fit? So I would love to suggest. I would love suggestions. The only thing I can think of is after Hashem told him that your life to me is an avodah, so then David changed his attitude, and then maybe he wanted to live. But otherwise, it's a little bit difficult to understand. If David wanted to hasten the Beis Hamikdash, then why would he pushed off his death?
It's just the Yerushalmi arguing with the Bavli.
It could be, yeah.
Yosy, why are they called Leitzanei Ador? These don't sound like Leitzanim to me. The ones who are making fun of Chev Masayamu Zoken Zeh, right? This is not Leitzanei Ador. No, you said the Leitzanei Ador making fun of David.
The Gemara says every generation has Latzanim, and the Gemara was illustrating what the Latzanim in David's door did.
Yeah, but what's the Leitzanis they were saying? They were saying that he should die?
Well, they were shepherding him. They were saying, David HaMelech, we yearn for the Beis Hamikdash. Everybody knew what that meant. They didn't say it outright. So they were being conniving, in a way, saying things that should have been troublesome. And the Latzanim, because if he ever confronted them, they said, no, chas v'sholom. We never meant that you should die. We just meant that we have a tshuka for the Beis Hamikdash.
Because it's not the quote that I remember. Leitzanim is Masayamu Zoken Zeh.
That's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu.
That was Moshe Rabbeinu only? It wasn't by David?
No, I thought that's what the Nevi'u said.
And we'll get to go into Eretz Yisrael.
and we'll take over.
We'll take over.
And
Okay.
David was known. David was always beaten up. David always got attacked from everybody until it came for Shlomo to bring the Aron into the new Beis Hamikdash, and he said Sushar Meshechem, and until they invoked David HaMelech, it wouldn't open up. The doors wouldn't open up, and then it said that Nephu, all of the Soinim of David, Keshulek Ter, their faces were blackened because after all the years that they were making fun of David, Hashem announced for the whole world to see that David's in my good books, and you guys aren't in my good books. Okay, let's see the Mishnah. 3 times a year, they would take coins out of the Lishka. Before Pesach, before Shavuos, and before Sukkot. And Beprois means half of the time of the 30 days, which the Gemara will explain. These are also the 3 harvests of Maisha Behema. Now, the Talmud tells us there's no harvest by Maisha Behema, but there were 3 periods generally where the animals gave birth. They gave birth before Sukkot, they gave birth before Pesach, and they gave birth before Shavuos. So that's how it worked out. Divi Rabbi Kiva, B'nazir Oimrim, Be'esrim V'tisha B'adar, the 29th day of Adar, U've'echad B'sivan. So Echad Be'esrim V'tisha B'adar is B'prois of Pesach. Maybe one day off. U've'echad B'sivan, the first day of Sivan, which is definitely not Prois because it's only 7 days before Shavuos, or 6 days before, U've'esrim V'tisha B'av, and the 29th day of Av, which is long before Tishrei. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon was Be'echad B'Nisan, Be'echad B'Sivan, and B'Chaf Tes Be'el. So those are 3-way machlokes. V'lomu Amar B'Chaf Tes Be'el. Why Chaf Tes El and not Rosh Hashanah? Amar Be'echad B'Tishrei, B'Teshu Yom Tov, because Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Tov. V'Evshar La'aser B'Yom Tov, and you cannot take off Meiser on Yom Tov. L'fichach Hiktimu B'Chaf Tes El. That's why they made it one day earlier, even though ideally it should have been on Rosh Hashanah. Amar Bo, Kol Hein Ditaninon Pras. Whenever we say Pras, Prois Pesach, Prois Atzeres, it means Palga.
Yosy, if you want to, sorry, Yosy, sorry to sideline it. I just wanted for not als Balagola, but als Ferd. Try on your audio settings to mute the background and raise it from just regular to high. I want to see if it works.
How do I on audio settings?
I apologize.
I can just tell them to low down.
Audio settings.
I'm in audio settings.
No. Go to audio settings.
I am in audio settings.
And the background, when it says mute, go to advanced. Yeah, go to background and go to.
Then I go to advanced. Okay, I'm on advanced. Okay.
Yeah. And go down halfway. It'll give you an option. Yes. So it says high. One of the options is really to mute the background.
Aggressive echo cancellation.
Correct. Try that.
Okay, I just did. Did it help?
We'll see. Go on.
Well, do you hear now? I'll just tell them to be quiet.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
I want to suppress background noise, just in audio settings. Suppress background.
Suppress background noise.
Suppress background noise. Let me see what I have here. So it's not echo cancellation?
No, not echo cancellation.
Okay, so I'm in regular, and where did it say suppress background noise? Auto. So should I go to high? Okay. Did that help?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Akiva. Amar Bavo. Kol hein ditanina pras. Whenever it says pras, it means palgo de lamed join kodim. It means halfway of the 30 days before kodim lemoid shedoshim b'alchoyim. So it means 15 days before. Then dronos Amar B'yochanan mipnei shein pirkei leida, because those are the times where the animals give birth. The reason why they did it before Yom Tov, the reason why they waited to give Meiser before Yom Tov wasn't because it was Pirkei Leida, it was because people generally didn't do anything with their animals until they took Meiser. Even though technically they were allowed to, but people didn't. They held on to their animals until there's Meiser. And we wanted people to have a lot of animals for Yom Tov. If everybody would wait If everybody would wait till before Yom Tov to take Meiser, they would also have all their animals available until right before Yom Tov, which means there would be a lot of animals for those people who are being Oila Regel to buy for Karbanos. The reason why they did the Meiser right before Yom Tov is because if you do it any other time, you'll leave your Meiser Rambas hanging around, and then come the next Yom Tov, you might forget to take them up with you. But if you separate the Meiser right before you bring Oila Regel, so then you have it with you, and you should take it right up to be makriv it on the mizveh. If you keep your teva for a long time and you don't take ma'itris, you will be over bal ta'achar because you have to take ma'itr right away. We learned a brayson. Reb Meir Omer, the echad be'elul Rosh Hashanah l'ma'itr behema. Echad be'elul Rosh Hashanah l'ma'itr behema. So now we're no longer discussing the 3 times a year that you take the ma'itr. Rather, we're talking about the cutoff date. You only could separate ma'itr for a group of animals that was born in the same year. You cannot mix animals that were born in one year with animals that were born in the next year. You have to keep the animals from year to year isolated. So when is the cutoff date for the year? Reb Meir said Echad Be'el. Reb Shimon Oimrim Be'echad B'Tishrei. It's a month later. Then Azri Oimrim, since we have a machloikis, if it's El or Tishrei, Ha'elulim, Mis'ashim Ifnei Atzman. We don't know if El is part of the previous year or it's part of the next year. So the animals from El have to be isolated, and you're miting them by themselves. Amar Chuna, Talmud Reb Meir. What's the svara for Reb Meir? Is Atkan Hein Mismatzois Leiled B'nai Shanim. It all depends on when the animal became pregnant, and where the cutoff date isn't really Echad Be'el. The cutoff date is the pregnancy, which was 5 months earlier, which was Echad B'Nisan. So all of the animals that we became pregnant, became uberis before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, all those would have been born already by Echad Be'el, and the animals that are born after Echad Be'el, those conceptions, those pregnancies would have occurred after Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So really what we're looking for is when the animal became pregnant, but from when the animal gives birth, we're reverse engineering to know when they became pregnant. So therefore, any animal that was born up until Echad Be'el, we know became pregnant before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Mikan ve'elay, hein maschilos leil ben achadoshes. After Echad Be'el, any baby born, any animal born, would have been conceived later. Now, this is based on a 5-month gestation period, which will refer to smaller animals, dakois. Large animals have a 9-month gestation period, and the Rishonim speak out that that's going to be difficult, because this only explains if you're dealing with the animals that have a 5-month period. What's the Rebbe Shimon who holds that the cutoff date is not Echad Be'el, rather the cutoff date is Echad B'Tishrei, which means there's going to be some animals born in Elul that were conceived after Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So you're sort of mixing the animals from before Nisan and after Nisan, because they have a pasuk. It says, "Lot Shukarim Hatzoin." The soin got closed up, meaning they became pregnant. Elu Abachiras. These are referring to the animals that gave birth earlier. The Mokim Yatfu Bar and the ones in the depth. Also fill up with food. That's Elu Afilos. Those are the later ones to give birth. I'm sorry, those are the later ones to become pregnant. They're the later ones to become pregnant. So those who became pregnant early before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and those who became pregnant late after Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Yisrael Af Yashiru. They will be friends. They will combine in friendship, and they will say shir, meaning that Elu Nichnasan Ladir L'Saser. Both animals that conceived before Nisan, before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and animals that conceived after Rosh Chodesh Nisan can all combine together to give Meiser, meaning the cutoff date is not conception of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and they learn that it's not totally in a pregnancy. It's totally in giving birth, and as long as they gave birth before Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, they're considered part of the same year. Amar Benazai. So Benazai said, so we have a machlokes: is the cutoff Rosh Chodesh El or is the cutoff Rosh Chodesh Tishrei? Hoil be'elu ayrim kach. Be'elu ayrim kach. So we have a machlokes if El is connected to the year before, or if El is connected to the year after. You haluli and misasim b'fnei atman. Therefore, El will be isolated. Okay, that noided loy hey ba'av. If 5 animals were born in Chodesh Av, the hey ba'elul, and 5 animals were born in Elul, the hey b'tishrei, and 5 animals were born in Tishrei, ein mitzarfen. The 5 animals that were born before Elul cannot combine. The 5 animals born in Elul will not combine with anything, and the 5 animals born in the next month in Tishrei don't combine. But noiloi, the hey b'tishrei, the hey ba'ov. But if the first batch of animals gave birth hey Tishrei, and the second batch of animal gave birth the of later, so that's still within 1 year, harei elam mitzarfen, that is a group of 10 from which you can take meister behem. Right to Gemara, if Ben Abba is saying, since I'm not sure if I should pass on like A or B, I'm not sure if I should pass on like Reb Meir or Reb Shimon, to be misafik, I'm going to be machmer like both of them. Right to Gemara, how could you say that? Ben Azai machriya al dirvei talmidav also. Ben Azai was greater. He was the Rebbe of Reb Meir. He was the Rebbe of Reb Shimon and Reb Elazar. So he has to say, since these two titans are arguing, who am I to Paskin, who's right? It's way above my pay scale, so I'm going to have to be machmer to both sides. But Kerek, Ben Azai should be able to Paskin. He was greater than them. Dr. Gemara, Asher B'Yirmi Reb Ma'aseh B'Shem Shmuel Bar Yitzchak. It's not only Reb Meir and the brother Reb Shimon who were arguing; they were titans. They were titans who argued. So therefore, who are those? Tanya Reb Yoina Kumer Reb Yirmiyah. It was Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, who were much greater than Ben Azai, who were before Ben Azai, they also argued on the same machlokes. And because of that, Ben Azai felt he couldn't be machriya, and he had to be machmer like both sides. That Ben Azai covered the Talmud Hoyd Rabbi Kiva. He wasn't merely a Talmud, but he also was. As he grew on in years and in greatness, he became a sort of an equal to Rabbi Kiva. How do I know that? In Tamer Rabbi, if you're going to say that Ben Azai was only a Talmud to Rabbi Kiva and he never grew to the level of an equal, if Barnash Omar LeRabbi Hoil ve'elu amrukach ve'elu amrukach, someone who's a Talmud of Rabbi Kiva wouldn't dare. Well, since these guys say this and those guys say that, that's not how you would speak. That's not how you would speak to your Rebbe. What you would have said was, since my Rebbe says this and Rabbi Shmuel says that, but he using the term elu ve'elu almost makes him sound like he's their buddy, and therefore you have arrived from here that Ben Azai wasn't only a Talmud to Rabbi Kiva, Ben Azai reached a level as an equal. He also proved from another place that Ben Azai became a co-equal with Rabbi Kiva, because Amalei Ben Azai, ala chalukun mitzdarin, there were 2 machlokes in between, I think, B'Shamai and B'Sil, and then there was a third case, and Rabbi Kiva said there's a machlokes there as well. And Ben Azai told Rabbi Kiva, ala chalukun mitzdarin, it's bad enough that we have 2 sets of machlokes. El Shabbos, now you're coming. Lachloik alenu is a shovin. Now you're trying to say there's a third machlokes. So how did he refer to Rabbi Kiva? Shabbos, you came. You don't speak to a Rebbe that way. Like the Meretz, Ben Azai covered with Talmud Hoyer Rabbi Kiva. He was a Talmud, but he also was a full equal. Because in Tamer Rabbi, if you're going to say that Rabbi Kiva was only the Rebbe Ben Azai, is Barnash Amar the Rabbi El Shabbos Lachlach Agleinu Shavin? There's no way Ben Azai would have spoken to his Rebbe that way. It must be that he rose to the level of equal. Look to the more about it. Talmud Tanina. We learned as follows. Anyone that gave birth, any animal gave birth from Rosh Chodesh Tishrei till Chavtes Elul, Harei Elam Mistarfin. So the year begins after the Tishrei, and then Chavtes Elul, and any animal born in that period is considered part of that same group. Because they're born in 2 different years. But if it was just one was before Sukkot, one was after Sukkot, or one before Pesach, one after Pesach, they are mitzvah. because the Garanos were just the times where they decided to take Meiser from the animals that were available. But the Garanos didn't represent any type of cutoff at all. There was only one cutoff, which was once a year. From here you see the Meiser Behema also like Chenet. When it comes to plants that grow, there are some plants that it all depends on when they bloomed. That's the cutoff date. That determines what year they're part of. And there are some plants like wheat, the Taklin speaks out, as well as zayt and olive. We say that they are considered registered for that year when they reach 1/3 of their growth. So Ma'aser Behema is not like neither. Now Chenet would be comparable by Ma'aser Behema to Ibur, to when the animal became pregnant, blossom, and Kishlish, partially grown, would represent when the animal is born and royu to be brought as a carbon. Because by the time an olive or wheat has grown a shlish, there's a chiyuv of trumas and maisus on them. So the comparison of chenet and shlish, which apply to plants, the parallel timing by animals would be conception and when they're old enough to be brought as a carbon, which would mean when they're 8 days old. So in Temer Chenet, if you say that the cutoff date for Ma'aser Behema is like by the blossoming, listen kol hameuborin be'echad b'tishrei ad eser b'tishrei be'elul. The writer should have said it depends on when it became conceived, when it became pregnant. It says kol hameilodim. And in Temer Kishlish, and if it's Kishlish, meaning when it's royal to be brought as a carbon, listen kol hameilodim ad eser b'shnayim be'elul. It shouldn't have said that if it was born until the last day of Elul, because any animal that's born in the last day of Elul cannot be brought as a carbon that year. You'd have to wait 8 days, which is already into the next year, till it can be brought as a carbon. So it shouldn't say the cutoff date is 22 Elul, because then on the last day of Elul, this animal can be brought as a carbon. So therefore, Ma'aser Behema has no parallel to plants because it has a whole different set of rules, because you allow it to be brought in the same shift up to the 29th day of Elul. Dr. Gemara Shamoy b'Shem Rabibi b'Rabchia says Kishlish also. Really, it means only when it's right to be brought as a carbon. But we hold our Reb Shimon, Damar Reb Shimon, Mechosher Zman, Nichnas Ladir Lis Aser. Even though you couldn't bring it as a carbon, then what do you do with Ma'aser Behema? It's brought as a carbon. So this animal, even though it's born too close to the end of the year, which means it will not be royal to be brought as a carbon on the last day of the year, nevertheless, you still combine it with the animals from last year. Even though you can't bring it as a carbon this year, you'll bring it as a carbon next year, but it's still combined with the animal from last year. Now, this Reb Shimon is a yochid. Most people don't hold like it. However, who is the Shita who holds that the cutoff date is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei? It was Reb Shimon, as we saw earlier in the Mishnah. So you can argue that Reb Shimon is L'Shitasi. Reb Shimon who says the cutoff date is Chodesh Elul also holds that it doesn't matter if the animal cannot be brought as a carbon yet, because he holds that even if it's Mechosher Zman, even though the animal cannot be brought as a carbon, it could still be considered part of last year's group, and you'll wait a week till you actually are makrabit, if it turns out being the 10th animal. So come Reb Mona and Reb Shammai. We'll go into the Gra, because the Gra drastically changes the Girsa here, and there's a machloikus of how to learn Pshat, but we'll learn it like the Gra, because the Taklan also follows the Gra. So if I go into the base, did you actually say this rule? Did you actually say that this price is working with Reb Shimon, who holds that you could take Ma'aser Behema on an animal, even though the animal is premature and you can't be brought as a carbon? Yes, exactly. I did say that. Amalei, how could you say that? Hatam on Taninon, we learned something that would disagree with you. Because the Brisa also says, Ben Azay Omer, Ha'eluliim is Ashrin La'atzma. Now, it means that all of the animals born in Elul are their own separate group. Well, let's think about it. If he says all of Elul is brought together, that means all of Elul every single day. Lo yafil noilad ad etzem v'tisha be'elul. That means even animals that were born up to the last day of Elul. Well, what about those animals? The animals that are born in the last week of Elul cannot be brought as a carbon. Zok the Gra Viter who changes the Girsa. So what are you going to have to say in Ben Azai? You can't say that Ben Azai is also going according to Reb Shimon. I understand Reb Shimon, you said is going like Reb Shimon. So even though Reb Shimon is a shita that we don't really accept, because we hold that you cannot take Maisha from an animal that's not roy to be brought as a carbon. But in Reb Shimon will agree. But to say that Ben Azai, the Tana Ben Azai, is also conforming with Reb Shimon, that we can't go so far and say. Because it's not logical to say that, because most people don't know that Reb Shimon. So Ben Azai Reb Shimon, you can't say that. You cannot say that. Ella, Kamadat Amr al Ben Azai. So how are you going to have to explain Ben Azai? You're going to have to say, according to Ben Azai, is that Manichin L'Shah Haba, they misasking B'nei Elulim. You'll have to say that even though we still consider them part of the group of Elul, but we don't bring them as a carbon until later. You're going to have to say that's what Ben Azai meant. Well, then, once you're saying that in Ben Azai, Kain at Amr al Derabanan, you can say that in the Derabanan as well, that Manichin L'Shana Haba, you leave these animals to next year. So even though the group that they're grouped together with for Meiser, but you leave them to the next year, they miss Asin and B'nei Shnasa. But the problem is, we already said that you cannot take Meiser from an animal that is mechusser hakrav, that you can't make hakrav on. So what do you have to do? You cannot take the Meiser at the end of the year. What you have to do is, you have to, let's say I have one animal that was born too late. So what you have to do is take 9 more animals that were part of last year or part of El, and don't Meiser them, and save them for a week, and then in a week's time, all the animals will be ready for a carbon, and only then do you take the Meiser. According to Reb Shimon, you take the Meiser right now, and then you save this animal to be brought as a carbon for a week. According to Rabbanon, you'll just take the Meiser later. Instead of being Meiser all the animals, you save enough animals to combine with the animals that were born late. You wait a week, and then you do the Meiser. So if you're going to say that in Ben Azai, you can say that in the Rabbanon as well, and therefore we don't have to come on to Reb Shimon, who says that your Meiser it's right away, and you just save the carbon till later. Rather, you do the whole Meiser process later once all of the animals are properly matured. So Zok Gemara, once you have that, it teaches us a new thing. And it teaches us Amr Achir Zoyte Meres. From here you see that Yomim Shabachar Mechusher Zman Vahen Oidon L'Shach Shnasa. So let's think about it. What do we do over here? According to the Rabbanim, we're saying you have an animal that was born the last 3 days of Elul. Let's say it was born Chav Zayin Elul. You cannot be makriv as a carbon this year. So what do? You save 9 other animals that were born this year. You wait a week, and then you take the Meiser, and whichever one has to be brought as a carbon is brought as a carbon. So it's very interesting. Even though this animal can't be brought as a carbon this year, but you still consider it from last year. So even though it was born Chav Ches Elul, and you wouldn't be able to be makriv this year, you still consider it part of this year. So Zok Reb Mana, from here you see, Zok Abchi, from here you see that Yomim Shabachar Mechutz Man Bahen Ein L'Tetz Nasei. A Bechor is a carbon, just like Meiser. A Bechor is a carbon. Now the halacha is a Bechor you have 1 year to be makriv, and if not, you're over about the acher. The question is, when does the clock start ticking for that 1 year? Does it start ticking when it's born, or does it start ticking once it's royal to be brought as a carbon, which is a week later? From here you see that the clock starts ticking as soon as it's born, even though it's not yet eligible to be brought as a carbon. Because what do you see by Meiser? By Meiser you see, even though these animals aren't royal to be brought as a carbon, we still consider them grouped with the animals from last year. So the fact that it can't be brought as a carbon doesn't change its date. So too by Bechor, even though you can't bring it for a carbon until it's 8 days old, but when you start the clock ticking, it starts to tick as soon as it's born. Omar ben Rabbi Yoina, Abba Shamal ben Hadar, we learned it from another pasuk as well, from another source as well, from a pasuk. It is called Bechor Yivolet Ezocher Taktish You see, it's a bechor from the moment it's born, and therefore you count a year from when it's born, and at that point to the cutoff. Okay. I can continue with 1046. It's not a difficult amid. We can go through it in probably 10 minutes if the item would like. Okay, I'll assume the item wants to go back to. The Takman learns that there was a big room full of coins that everyone contributed to, and what they did 3 times a year is they took 3 containers. Each container had 3 soyin, with 3 soyin, and they filled up those 3 containers, which means 3 times a year they pulled out 9 soyin, which means through the course of the year they pulled out 27 soyin. So there were shalosh kubot, shalosh soyin, carbon shalishka, the chaz of alen, and these 3 containers that each of them was 3 soyin, they were numbered. Aleph, Beis, Gimel. Rabbi Shmuel Aimer, they used the language that was more common, that people were familiar with, which was the Greek language, alpha, beta, gamma, which is 1, 2, 3 in Greek. You're not allowed to, if you're being term, which means you're responsible for the money. So to make sure you're squeaky clean, you're not allowed to have any type of folds or cuffs in your clothing that you could possibly conceal coins in. You can't even go in with shoes. You have to go in barefoot because you can hide money in your shoe. Sandal, not with a sandal. You can't even go with tefillin because you could pop them open and shove a coin in. Not with the kameya, which was an amulet that was usually in a leather pouch. Why? You can't win. If the person who is doing the Tumas Halishka becomes poor, the Yomer will say, you know why he became poor? Because he stole from the Lishka, and that's why he became poor. Or if he becomes wealthy, they'll blame him, and they'll say, the Yomer, with Tumas Halishka Hesher, he probably made money off of the Tumas Halishka. So therefore, the person who goes in has to be so squeaky clean that there's no possibility for anyone to even suggest that there's any wrongdoing.
Yosy, so why are we even chayshish? Why are we even chayshish that people will do this? Why we should have so many gedarim just because of the chash?
Yeah, and we'll see why. So the Mishnah Shadam Tzarech Lotas Yidei Abrios Kederech Shu Tzarech Lotas Yidei Amokim. A person has to make sure that he's always squeaky clean and there's not even a perception of any type of conflict. So it's not that they're choshedim, but he has to go out of his way to be transparent. Very similar to the way our liberal government works. Fully transparent, so there's no way anybody can possibly even suggest that there's any type of wrongdoing. And it says in the pasuk, you have to find favor in people's eyes, meaning you got to be squeaky clean. We learned on Shabbos, if there's a place that has bales or containers and it's in your way because you want to have guests there, even though it's a tircha, you're allowed to move away 4 or 5 boxes to clear out space to accommodate guests. Rabbi Zira Sholas, Rabbi Yosy, Kamahu Shiur and Shalkupos. So how big of these boxes that you're allowed to move out on Shabbos, how big can they be? Amrlei, Nilmoid, let's learn how big these boxes are allowed to be. Nilmoid, in Shabbos, it's not clear how big these boxes are allowed to be, but let's tap into Shekalim to see how big these boxes could be. The Tanya B'Sholish Kupa Shol Sholish Soyin, Shem Tisha Soyin, Shem Esrim V'Sheva Soyin, altogether 27, permanent Salishka. So you see that a box is considered 3 Soyin. So Huadin in Shabbos, when it says you're allowed to move boxes around, those boxes can be up to 3 Soyin. So Chazav Lein Aleph Beis Gimel, if they're not Chazav Lein Aleph Beis Gimel, why were they numbered? So this is important. The Loimar is topic when a Rishonya Kadim L'Shniya. When you took out these 3 containers of money, you have to first deplete the first container. When a Shniya Kadim L'Shniya, then you depleted the second container and then the third. We learned we learned this in Shabbos. There's a halacha that's also to be mochi something from Mishra Yachter Shusharabim, but it has to be something of significance. So if you were carrying wine, how much wine would you have to carry? You'd have to carry enough that you could make Mezikas Akos. We already know, but it's soon going to be discovered, that that's a revius of wine once it's already diluted, or a revius less than a revius if it's raw wine. The Reb Zira Sholas Reb Yosy, Kama Shiurin Shel Kais. How big is this kais that you'll be chayiv if you carry it out on Shabbos? Again, the Mishnah in Shabbos is not clear. Let's learn Tzasim from Amfurish from Pesach. It's not your B'chia, and let's look at the Gra. The Gra changes everything. The sugi is very different according to the Gra. It says Arba Kodesh Sha'amru, the 4 koshes that we said. Yeshnon Revius Yain Italki. There are revius of Italian wine. So you see the shear of wine is a revius. Echad Chai, say if it's raw wine and it's not diluted. Vechad Mazuk, and it's even if it's diluted, that's exactly how much it has to be. It has to be revius no matter what. So when you carry it out, it has to be a full revius. Kama Shiurin Shel Kaisos. What is the shear of kosher? So I'm skipping a lot because the Gra cuts out a lot of this, and he actually places some of it back in later. But we're going to go back to where the Gra said, Kama Shiurin Shel Kaisos, which is over here. Kama Shiurin Shel Kaisos, Rabbi Avin Amar, and the kaisos that we're talking about, that the Gemara is asking about, Kama Shiurin Shel Kaisos is Aydin the Master, kaisos the Pesach, Mahade Lefusha Sugi the kaisos. So now we're discussing how much is the share of the kaisos of Pesach? About the number, Titrun Urevia. Titrun Urevia was some shear. It was a measurement of those days, and that plus a quarter of that measurement adds up to Revius. We know we drink our kaisos spaced according to the Agada, but the Gemara wants to know here: are you allowed to drink him in one shot without spacing them according to the Agada? Dr. Gemara, and this is not how we paskin. The Amar Abmono Amar Yosy, Hallel, the Hallel in Shaman the Beis Knesset. If you heard it in the Beis Knesset, Yotza your Yosha, and you don't have to say Hallel again by your Seder, which means you're just going to drink the third and fourth kois one after the other. The Amar from here, I would deduce that in Mishratim the Krach Echad Yotza, if you drank all the kois together, you see the third and the fourth you could drink right after the other. So who had in all the kois, you could drink them right after the other. Now let's go to the Piska. Can you drink them in very small amounts? Because the Takwan brings that yain is not so, unlike food, if you eat it in little bits or if you eat in big chunks, all that matters to satisfy you is how much mass of food gets into your stomach. When it comes to drinking wine, if you drink it in larger gulps, it'll satisfy you. But if you just drink it in tiny little sips, it won't satisfy you. So the question is by the Seder, can you drink really small sips, or do you have to have gulps? So the Gra says, Blum Omru, Ela Sheyishta, Lo Sheyishtaker. It doesn't say anywhere that you have to become a shikar and become satisfied. It just means you need to drink it. And therefore, if you take small sips, you would be Yotza. So in Shasa, the Piskon, Afu Ein Mishtaker, if you drink it in little bits and little sips, you won't get drunk, but it's not a problem. Now the Gemara wants to know about Pesach night. Ma'alotis behind Shal Shvius. Shvius that expired, it passed as mandir. It's Osir Bahana. Can you be yoitz in the midst of Dalat Koisos with wine that's Osir Bahana? Dr. Gemara, Tanya Boishia, yoitzin behind Shal Shvius. You are yoitz with wine that's Osir Bahana. Ma'alotis bekonditin. Can be yoitz with spiced up wine that has spices and honey in it, flavored wine. Miditani Bar Kapora, kunditin keyain. Since Bar Kapora said that kunditin is like wine, the Amr that would indicate that yoitzin beyain kunditin, you would be yoitz with that type of wine. Ma'alotis beyain nezukin. What about to be yoitz with very diluted wine? Miditani Rabchia, Arba Koisos, Shoamru, yoitzin ben yoitz, ben chayin, ubein nezukin, yoitz. Both if they're raw, meaning very, very, very concentrated, or very mezugan, or if they're very diluted, and the Tikkun says, if it's so strong that it doesn't taste like wine, then you won't be yotze. So it has to be diluted enough that at least it tastes like wine. But if it's so diluted that it doesn't even look like wine, then it also you wouldn't be yotze. So it's got to be diluted enough that it tastes like wine, but not diluted so much that it doesn't look like wine. Mitzvah lotus b'yayin edoin. The mitzvah is to be eaten with red wine. Shenemar, we have this in Tzachim. Altera yayin. Don't drink too much wine. Ki yisadem, it'll make you red. Ki yidim b'koy sheidon. So we learned that the wine is red. Now we can go into the Gimel, which is the draw, once again changing things. Altera yayin ki yisadem. V'shel mozog v'kamo. How much of yayin mozog can you carry? So the Gemara. Let's learn from here. It says, so you see that the shears are obvious. Would you be yoitze the dalat koises with yain mevushel? Rabbi Yoina min madatani mevushel kimetubo. Since it says that mevushel is like spiced up wine, which we already said spiced up wine is you could be yoitze. Therefore, I would say yotzim b'yayin mevushel. You'll be yotzim with yayin mevushel. Now, yayin mevushel weakens the wine a little bit, so it's not so strong. The tickling tells us. So, Rabbi Yoina Tamei, Rabbi Yoina, who says that your yotzim with yayin mevushel is consistent with what he said. So, Rabbi Yoina kadav shosei arba kosses the pischa when he drank the arba kosses of Pesach, he would have a headache until Shavuos, because the wine would cause him so much pain. So you see, he must have allowed you to use yain mevushel, so you shouldn't suffer so much. Since he suffered so much, clearly he must have allowed the yain mevushel. That's one way. That's how Tickle learns. So Rajba learns, Fakir, you learn from here that you have to drink the wine even if it's going to give you a headache.
So yain mevushel is not because it reduces the chashivas. That's the way we learned it till now. That's why we don't make kiddush on it, because it's not as kosher. It does
reduce the chashivas, but it also reduces its strength. But and you see from Yoina held that even though it reduces chashivas, you're still allowed to use it. And the Tikkun actually brings down, there's actually a shita to say that in fact mevushel makes it more chashuv, because he brings it in the Gemara in Trumas. It says Rabbi Hitter Lavacho Yain Shel Truma B'Pnei Shem Ashbichai. It's actually a shaila if mevushel makes it worse or if it makes it better. But everybody agrees it makes it less strong, and therefore it's less likely to give you a headache.
Is that true today? That's just because it's pasteurized, the wine is not as powerful? I don't
know the answer to that. The wine that I drink is barely wine. I drink Farbrengen.
Right.
So it's 3.5. There are cheetahs who hold that you have to be at least 4% alcohol to be wine. But I still use the Farbrengen. There's nothing more weiter. Kamise, a fancy lady, a fancy princess, saw Rabbi Yoina that Apoy his face was glowing. She assumed he was a little tipsy. Amr Saba, you must have one of three conditions if you're glowing like that. Either you're drunk, or you lend money for ribbis, meaning you make a lot of profit with minimal work. You have windfall. People who have windfall generally are glowing. Or you grow, what's the word for it when you grow animals? You raise. Again, it's very profitable with not a lot of work, and people who make a lot of money without a lot of work generally have a glow to them. Amalei said wrong, and wrong. Tipach rucha teitza. Her ruach should be pained and inflicted. None of these things are me. You know why I'm glowing? I'll tell you why I'm glowing. I chazer a lot, so I am clear in all my Torah, and all the Torah that I have available to me, that makes me glow. The Holy Spirit says in the pasuk, "Chachmas Odim Torah." What makes a person's face glow is remembering of the Torah. Rabbi Vo came to Tzveria. Chamunei Talmidoi Rabbi Yochanan Api Nehurim. They saw that Rabbi Vo's face was glowing. So if they saw his face was glowing, they figured he must have just won the Powerball. Amrin Talmidim Rabbi Yochanan Ashkach Rabbi Vo Sima. Rabbi Vo must have just found a treasure. He's glowing. That smile could only come from a windfall. Also, Lagabe. So when he came to them, Amr Lay, Rabbi Yochanan was smarter than that. Rabbi Yochanan knew what a real windfall was, and he knew what spoke to Rabbi Bo, what would really put a glow on Rabbi Bo's face. And he told him, "Maya Raisa Chadit Shamas, what new Chiddush and Torah did you hear?" Because he knew for sure where it came from. Amalei, what are you talking about? The Tosefta Atika. I found a new Tosefta an old Tosefta that I never saw before, and I saw Tosefta, a new limud, and that made his face glow exactly as Rabbi Yochanan suggested. Karalei, Rabbi Yochanan said, referring to Rabbi Bo, Chachmas Adam Tar Panav. The Chachma of a person makes his face glow. Over Chanan Luga Dairaisa, the Luga of the Torah, it's the Munta Atika de Maraisa de Tipure. It's the old measurement called Tamunta that was used to measure Maraisa, I think it was fish juice, in the city of Tipure. That was exactly alike. And I remember that year, the Beit Rabbi Yanai, I remember in the house of Rabbi Yanai, they would measure honey in that keli. And then we'll just get on to that one out. It's a very simple Gemara. And once again, we'll use the Gra because he changes the gears quite a bit. And he says in Dalid, the Beit Rabbi Yanai is filling with Vash. In the Rabbi Yanai's household, they measure the Vash with it. Why was it called old? If they use it now in the Rabbi Yanai's household, it's not old. It's a current type of measurement. But why are you calling the Atika the old measurement? So the Gemara, because the Gra says the reason why I call it the new measurement of Makar Latika. So let's look at the Gra over here on this side of the Aleph. Why do I call it old? I call it old because min begin dahava b'yoyimei zeira. What happened was in his days that shear became smaller. First it was a small shear. I'm sorry. Merupsa, then that shear got bigger, and then Viziris, and then it got smaller again. So the reason why I said it's the old measurement is because this shear of the Tamunta got bigger, and then it got smaller again. So that's why he said, yes, we use it now, but this is the original shear of Tamunta from before it got bigger, because it got bigger and it got smaller. So this is current, but it's also equivalent to the ancient one that they used to use before it got bigger. And I guess we could stop over here.
Shkoyach, Yossi. Thank you.
Sorry we went
Good
too long,
morning.
but now we're cutting.